There wasn't really just one turning point for me. I was still very involved in the church and had relationships with the church. Wasn't as like PK's families typically are. My faith was huge in that moment because I had so much fear over it all.
Welcome back to another episode of Unscripted with A&J, and following with our April theme.
Yeah.
Sharing testimonies.
Yes.
And today is Abby Elise Stephenson's
Yay.
testimony.
The PK.
The PK.
The PK.
So
Yeah.
She was like,
I'm a PGK.
PG?
Mm-hmm.
PGK?
Preacher's grandkid.
GPK. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Peach's grandkid. PGK.
Well, I'm a PK.
Yeah, you a PK.
I'm a PK.
I'm not a PK.
Not a PK. You're a DK.
DK.
I'm a DK. Deacon's kid.
DEK.
Oh, I thought you were
Deacon
also
and
a
evangelist
I am.
kid.
Yeah. That's who I am.
That was really
Yeah.
smooth.
So
Yeah.
PK.
Regardless, we're all church kids.
We're all
Yeah.
church.
We love the Lord.
Church,
we live to
church.
make him
Churchy.
famous.
So
We
Abby, what's your story?
She was just like, yes.
Waiting for it.
She giving you like the bashful look.
Aw.
Bring
Yes.
the shoulder up. Bring the shoulder up.
Yes, girl.
What's your
Okay.
story? How do you know Jesus?
Man, just spit it all out. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a PK, grew up in the church as well. My dad worked as more of like the next gen pastor in non-denominational churches, beliefs being closest to Baptist, and that's the type of churches I grew up in. But I did not grow up in just one church my entire life. Mm-hmm. We actually moved around a lot. Both my brothers and I were all born in different states that we moved to because we'd moved to different churches. Mm-hmm. Just opportunities where God would open up a door for my dad to have the same position that he was in the church, but with his job, there was a lot of churches would bring him in because they wanted a change. Yeah. They wanted to grow, mm-hmm. and they wanted to make their youth and their kids' church bigger. Mm-hmm. And when it came down to it, I think they just didn't really want to make the changes that he was there to do.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of toxicness in the church. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any church you go to, no matter how perfect you think it is, there's something going on behind the scenes. Yep. And that's just a byproduct of us living in a fallen world. Yeah, that doesn't make
people.
Yeah. That doesn't make our God any less perfect, but there's always going to be something somewhere that we're not going to represent him in the best way. So there was a lot of times that we moved around just because God opened up another door, mm-hmm. and it was in a different state. So with that, just kind of moving around, not having roots in like my daddy's been the pastor and I have all of this in with this pastor. I was still very involved in the church and had relationships with the church just because I was the staff's kid, but it wasn't as like maybe like as PK's families typically are, where you're like, oh, like, so you've known all these people since you were a tot. Like, no, I don't even keep in touch with my childhood best friends anymore because we didn't have phones at that time. So I don't even remember their last names because we were just kindergarten friends. So that was my childhood of church.
Nice. So
he's like, nice.
Sorry. So like, what was like the point where your faith became more than just like, oh, I go to church because my parents go to church. My dad works in the church. Yeah. My mom works in the church, whatever.
Yeah. So same as Anja, there wasn't really just one turning point for me. I do remember in middle school going to a camp, and I can't tell you what it was that was preached about that night. I can't tell you anything about the sermon, but I just remember sitting there and never had felt so seen in a sermon before. And I just kind of had like a revelation of like it all clicking and being like, oh, like, you know, this life is gonna suck and I can't rely on my own strength to get through it. Like I need God. And he's not a tyrant that is going to make my life miserable, but he wants me to surrender to him.
Yeah.
And so that was the moment when I decided to give my life to Christ. And like Anja talked about too with hills and valleys, I feel like that's been, obviously it's part of everyone's story, but definitely like in high school with having moved around so much, I had a hard time with friendships because I always felt like I was someone's second pick. Like I might be good friends with someone, but they have a better connection that they've known for longer, or they'll choose someone else over me. And so I had a lot of times in high school where I would just, like I remember sitting on like the rug in my room, just on my knees and crying and being like, God, like, why can I never find someone who wants to be my friend as much as I want to be theirs? Or like, why am I always left out of these things? And that was something where not that I think God made my friendships fail, but I think he used that to help me realize like, I don't need to rely on anyone else. Of course, he created relationships and community and he wants us to have that. But I was just so dependent on what people thought of me and being sure that I had those friends and connections, and he really used that to strengthen my relationship with him and help me realize like he needs to be first in my life. And that was really, I think, when I started to come out of just what my parents had taught me growing up and began to understand God for my own. I still did not do a good job at all of reading my Bible consistently, and I still struggle with that just because it's something where it's like, where do I find the time in the day? But you have to make the time in the day.
Definitely.
But it's been something more where as like I see the need when I do read my Bible daily or even when I'm just praying daily. I see where like my entire mindset and attitude changes for the better. And I find that like, as weird as it sounds, life isn't as stressful when you're doing those things, even though they like sound to like the outside world like it's not that big of a step to take. Those little acts of surrender build up, and then you realize when you're in those valleys like, hey, I don't have to try to figure it out on my own because he has me.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's good.
Cool.
That's good.
How has like, I was thinking about like, we talked about y'all's relationship and your marriage. How do you feel like your faith walk has impacted your marriage?
Man, a lot. Honestly, I don't think that Josiah and I would have, well, I know we wouldn't have ended up married if we didn't have the same faith. But also like just with the way that we met and the age that we met and the people that we had surrounding us at the time, like influencing our decision to get married, my faith was huge in that moment because I had so much, not doubt in my decision to marry Josiah, but just fear over it all because he was my first boyfriend, first relationship ever. And that's a huge step to take. That's forever. And for us, like divorce isn't even an option on the table. Like unless there's some sort of physical abuse, which there's not, but like, you know, that's not something that is even a possibility. So it was a huge decision to make. And I just, during the time that Josiah and I met, that was when I was being like, had a season of being able to be very consistent in my Bible and just praying. And I felt like I was like hearing from God very, you know, you don't always hear from God the way that you want to. You're like, God, show me a neon butterfly 7 times and I'll know.
And I'll know it's you.
It was more like me just asking God, okay, if this is not my husband, I need you to make it so painfully like known to me. I need to be off my rocker, no peace. Like, you know what I'm going to be able to interpret, Lord. And there were so many things just time and time again, which we've talked about a little bit on some of the other podcasts where it was like, I knew God's hand was in all of the circumstances that were happening. Like there was no way that this person in their natural would have decided to do that if God had not changed their heart just now. Right. Or like, there's no way like you just happen to be able to sell the exact amount of equipment you needed to be able to buy the plane ticket, or like little things like that would build up when I was feeling really down, that gave me the encouragement that I was looking for. Yeah. And then also, I mean, your parents are such a big blessing, and I love them so much. And being able to, I called Sarah before I had ever even met her in person and just talk with her about some stuff that I was like, is this something that I need to be like concerned about? Or like, you know, you went through similar testimonies, getting her side and being able to have that like mentor to look to. Yeah. And her just be so candid and honest with me, but wanting to walk me through it. And then she never even met me. Yeah. And I was like, girl, like, you're telling me, like, you're telling me how you can see my side of the story. And like, you know, like this has to do with your son. I'm like, how are you opening up your heart to me and able to talk with me in this way?
A lot of people wouldn't do that.
No.
Their leanings are towards their biases towards their child, and whatever they want is best for their child. But like being able to like instantly care for you is kind of cool.
My mom's willing to talk crap on me. So,
she didn't talk smack about you. She was very like.
Oh yeah, Josiah.
No,
sucks.
Sarah just had some wisdom that I needed to hear, and she was able to give me that, like, direct me in my Bible, like, this is where you need to read. Yeah, this is what I did, or like, you need to be praying about this, and if you can't find peace, she said, break it off, because I don't want. Obviously, I don't want my son to hurt, but she's like, I don't want you to go through all that if it's something that you ultimately like can't move on from. That's okay. Right. But you know, you need to be seeking the Lord in it. And and so obviously, you know, if I hadn't have had peace when it came to the whole relationship long distance, because long distance was not easy at all. We would not be here today. And I don't think we would have had a lot of the conversations that we had and that we continue to have if we weren't like knowing that God has put us together and ordained this marriage and had all that encouragement. I think there would be more doubts and questions that would creep in.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Makes sense. Man. So I was thinking about like I feel like at church and like sometimes when I'm up leading worship, I will see like the young ladies gather around you. And I don't know if you noticed that, but I notice it. It's something I notice on. They gravitate towards you. And so, like, if any of them were to hear this, what are some things like that you want them to take away from your story, and you know, and how God has worked in your life?
Yeah, man, there's so much I want them to know.
We need a whole
we need a whole podcast about that.
Just a whole thing. Let's do it.
I mean, so just like a little tidbit that Josiah just talked about is like things change so much outside of school. Yeah. The four walls that you're in and the like stereotypes that you see and the different people and the different groups, I don't want to say like it's gone outside of high school, but it changes so much. Yeah. And living for those people and those people's approval will never fulfill you, because you'll never be able to get to a place where everyone is like thinks of you the way that you want them to. Right. And I just feel like for me too, I am a recovering people pleaser, and that's something where learning to just put God first and reading in your Bible like how my identity stems from the Lord instead of how my identity stems from how other people view me or how good I am at this sport or whatever. Yeah. Finding your identity and rooting it in God over what other people are going to think. Right. Or any of that. And just, you know, surround yourself with people that are like-minded as well. That doesn't mean that don't have friends that don't have different beliefs, but ultimately like your closest friends are who are going to influence you that way. Right. And we need to have community that is going to uplift and support us.
Right.
And so I think that's really important too. And just, seeking the Lord in those hard times.
Yeah.
Because everyone's going to have their 2 cents. My parents even had their own 2 cents, which, you have to take people's opinions, and everyone's going to have an opinion no matter what. And it's not discard everyone's opinion, take it, but take it with a grain of salt,
Right.
because God's timing is going to be different than what other people want, or the way that God is going to orchestrate your story is not going to be the same as everyone else's.
Right. For sure.
And if you have peace with that with God, and you've truly sought him after it, then you can find comfort in that instead of questioning, well, that's not how I've seen it modeled before me, or typically, that even goes into, I feel like, our business with a lot of people don't do entrepreneurship because it's scary and there's not always something to fall back on.
Right.
But seeking the Lord in that, there's wisdom, and he'll open doors for you.
For sure.
So
That's good.
I think what I like about your testimony is that it just shows, like, you have people whose testimonies are like they're deep into drugs or things like that, all these different things. But even in something where someone may think like, well, my testimony isn't crazy, like, it's not about how crazy it is. It's the fact that it's another acknowledgement of someone realizing, I can't do this on my own.
Right.
There's something greater than me, and I need that thing in order to live. That's where my life comes from.
Right.
And there's unity in that, and that's what, it's not, clicks based off of your story and your testimony. It's a click in one unifying thing that is God.
Yeah.
And that's who brings all of us together,
Right.
And so what I like about that is that, I'm sure there's plenty of people that think like my testimony is boring.
Yeah.
Right. No one's going to care.
Yeah.
I got nothing to say, but your testimony was, oh, I can't do this on my own.
Right.
Like I need God,
Yeah.
And so, and I think that's even something like, specifically, like, a lot of times people that have grown up in the church, maybe, that, they grew up in the scenario of everyone else kind of already made the mistakes and you're born into the church. And so, like, you're good, not saying that those people don't end up, having crazy things happen or whatever, or having those wayward testimonies, but even in those sort of people that grow up in the church, they still have their own things. Like, like one person's struggling with drug addiction, the other person's struggling with pride.
Yeah.
One just comes in the form of a substance, and the other in the form of a mentality.
Yeah.
And so, but both of them are destructive to your soul, and both of them require the same medicine that is God.
Yeah.
And so,
That's good.
I think that's something that, like, is really encouraging for a lot of people, especially inside the church.
Yeah. That's good. For sure. That's
I
good.
think inside and outside, because sometimes the church has a tendency to put on a perfectionist mold or a perfectionist face.
Yeah.
When everybody's perfect and everybody's happy and nobody's struggling, and that's not the cool. That's, sick people are the ones who go to the hospital, and I think the people who are broken, who need Christ, are the ones who are going to the church.
Yeah.
So
For sure.
cool. Thank you so much, Abby, for sharing.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that.
That was
I
awesome.
appreciate it.
That was great.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, we will continue this
Yeah.
series in our next episode. I mean, it's only down to 2 people now who shares next. So we will see y'all. We're going to rock, paper, scissors after this.
Paper, rock, scissors.
Paper, rock, scissors. Okay. We'll see y'all after in the next episode.